we go. All right. Get this set up real quickly. A very unprofessional setup here. I'm going to go ahead and share this in the group. Thanks for helping me hit over 4,000 subscribers. I feel like every time I get to the next 1,000, it takes a little bit longer. Second to get to that, but I can't believe all those years ago when I started this channel that I would be up to over 4,000 subscribers. So thank you very much. If you have not joined the private Facebook group yet, it is Gently Led Sisters group. Just type that in. You should be able to find it. Lots of good conversations that happen in there. Hi, Ashley. I hope you're all having a great summer. It's been extremely busy over here. And yeah, even though I'm technically not doing school or not teaching, it's crazy. Craziness. Every day is full of something. So, okay, the reason for this show, for this specific subject that I'm talking about today is I have been watching, his name is John Deloney, I believe, on YouTube. Lots of really interesting calls that people send in. He's, I think like I think the Dave Ramsey show like hosted his show or something before he came back. I don't know. He's on YouTube. Look him up. Obviously, I don't agree with all of his advice, but I like that he's a hard hitter and he does seem to have some morals and different things and does seem to take into consideration how important vows are. When it comes to marriages, he has lots of marriage questions of people that call in. And one thing I've noticed is oftentimes because I've listened to the marriage questions, oftentimes I get lots of marriage questions that come in as my recommended on YouTube. And so I've been listening to all of these things that come in, and I sensed an underlining theme in a lot of the male callers that called in who were husbands, and they just were having a really hard time making their wives happy, making their wives happy, and making their wife happy. And they were just asking, how do I do this? Like, how do I make my wife happy when she just seems like nothing's ever going to make her happy? And through talking to them, you know, it just comes out that the wife is not happy overall. She's not happy with her life, and she's kind of putting all the blame for that on her husband. And it's just really interesting seeing how John Deloney kind of like breaks it down and kind of picks it apart. And obviously he's only hearing one side of the story. So there could be a whole nother side that the husband isn't presenting. I like it when both people call in because then that kind of provides an opportunity to hear both sides of the story. So obviously there's two sides to every story, right? But I just did notice that theme. And I wanted to touch on this subject today, the happy wife, happy life sentiment. I am sure that a lot of you have heard that happy wife, happy life. But oftentimes this comes down to the husband just bending over backwards to, you know, make sure that the wife is happy and like going to all these extremes, and they do more and more and more, and it's never enough for their wives. And at the end, the wife ends up divorcing him, and you know, it was all his fault when he really had been trying. And I do see this theme quite a bit. In fact, I looked up who initiates divorce. I looked this up because I did know that statistically, it's more often the wife or the woman in the relationship that initiates the divorce. And so I'm going to hit on that in a minute. And it's very, very high. Like 70% of divorces are initiated by the wife, which is terrible. And it should not be so. And I really think it comes down to this subject of she's just unhappy and she blames her marriage for her unhappiness. Maybe she had too high of expectations. She doesn't feel fulfilled, whatever it is, that it comes down to that. But it's really a shame. So more and more, I am realizing the importance of having a rock solid marriage when raising kids. You can still raise good kids if you've been through a divorce, you've been separated, you have marriage problems, etc. But the odds are much more slim if you want to raise happy, balanced kids. The older I get, the more I realize how much two people's marriage plays into raising good, productive, balanced kids. I do believe that for the most part, and there are exceptions, but husbands are usually the ones content and happy in marriage. One thing I have found is that when a husband decides till death do us part, he really takes that seriously. There are exceptions. There are those who, commit infidelity. There are those who cheat. But overall, men seem pretty committed. Men are like, I'm in this until death, right? While the woman tends to be unhappy, discontent, miserable. And because of that, she often initiates the divorce. In heterosexual marriages, women initiate approximately 70% of divorces. This trend is consistent across various studies and data sources. While some studies might show slight variations in the exact percentage, like 69 versus 70%, the general consensus is that women are significantly more likely to file for divorce than men. Several factors may contribute to this phenomenon. Some research suggests that women may have higher expectations of marriage, including emotional fulfillment and equity in domestic responsibilities, and may be more likely to seek divorce when these expectations are not met. Additionally, domestic abuse and societal shifts that have reduced the stigma surrounding divorce for women may also play a role. So this got me looking into more things like just kind of along the same, because that was the AI overview of it when I Googled it. But then there was an article that came up regarding this, and I kind of wanted to read the article really quickly. So it says, throughout generations, a common stereotype has been that women are usually the one in a relationship who wants to get married. Whether accepted or not, there is one fact that cannot be disputed, and that is that women initiate divorce more often than men on average. Numerous studies have shown this. In fact, nearly 70% of divorces are initiated by women. This is according to a 2015 research study conducted by the American Sociological Association, which suggests 2/3 of all divorces are initiated by women. Among college-educated women, this number jumps to 90%. 90% among college-educated women. That's crazy. So this begs the question, why is this the case? Well, it basically comes down to three main factors. Here are the three reasons why women initiate divorce more often than men. Number one, women are more likely to feel held back by marriage. The fact is that today women are working more than they ever have and make up a little over half of the workforce in the United States. However, in many marriages, women are still seen as primarily responsible for domestic duties, despite having more on their plates with their careers. Michael Rosenfield, an associate professor of sociology at Stanford University and author of the ASA study, stated, I think that marriage as an institution has been a little bit slow to catch up with the expectations for gender equality. Now, remember, this is a secular article I found. I don't necessarily agree with all the points in this. Wives still take their husband's surnames and are sometimes pressured to do so. Husbands still expect their wives to do the bulk of the housework and the bulk of the childcare. What's more is that other studies have shown that when both parties in a marriage are employed full-time, the woman in the relationship still does more housework than men in the relationship. And I want to pause and I want to say, kind of as a side note, this is Cassandra's words, okay? This is why I believe it is so important that the husband be the primary breadwinner in a relationship, especially when you believe in biblical roles in marriage. And if you believe that the woman should be the stay-at-home mom, the keeper of the home, which I do, and that's what I promote on this channel, when you, as a husband, are telling your wife, we have to have your income, you have to go out and work, but then you're also expecting her to come home and you're expecting her to clean and do all the meals and take care of the kids and put them to bed and vacuum the floors and stay up till midnight scrubbing the toilets. And you're putting all of that pressure on her. She's now bearing like both loads of the curse, I say that in quotations, but it's a true thing. When they fell in the Garden of Eden and God cursed the ground and said that men would have to, that was part of the curse. Eve's part was that, the childbirth part of it. So you're giving her both parts of that. You're giving her the man's part and the woman's part. And that's going to be too much for any of us women to handle. We are the weaker vessel, and there's no shame in that. We weren't designed to be out of our homes all day, working, climbing the corporate ladder, but then staying on top of everything in the home too. It's too much of a burden for anyone to bear. So I've noticed that when push comes to shove and a woman has to get a job outside the home and the man also has to work, there's just no way around it. They have to have two incomes. I believe that both should share in the responsibilities of whatever goes on in the home because, as the husband, you're expecting her to earn her keep or whatever. It's stupid, but you're expecting her to bring in an income. Well, then you also need to help out in the domestic responsibilities. So that's just my take on that. I think the way that a home works the best is when the man is the primary breadwinner and the wife stays at home and overlooks all the domestic responsibilities. I think that's when you have a very balanced home. The kids are getting the attention they need. They're being raised the way that you want them to be raised. They're getting the training that they need, so on and so forth. A 2019 report from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that on an average day in 2018, 20% of men did the housework, such as cleaning or laundry, compared with 49% of women. What this tells us is that there is inequality in the average household when it comes to domestic duties and labor among men and women. For married parties who have at least similar responsibilities from a full-time career, it is still women who are doing more of the work around the home as well. And I don't necessarily agree that that should be the case because if you're making her partake in the toiling part of the curse, and you need to help out with her part of the curse as well. So psychological distress. In addition, women often find that their husbands are not supportive when they are highly successful in their careers. In a 2019 study published in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, which included over 6,000 American heterosexual couples over 15 years, many men experience psychological distress if their wives made more than 40% of the household income in a marriage. That's interesting. So if a woman has high expectations and responsibilities from her career, high expectations and responsibilities at home, and does not have support from her husband on career advancement, she may not find the marriage to be in her best interest anymore. So basically, she's choosing career over marriage. Number 2, women often take on more of the emotional burden. Communication is key in any marriage, but often an area where many couples struggle. I agree with that. Generally, men are not taught how they can communicate and process emotions. I agree with that. As a result, women in marriage find that they often will take on more of the emotional responsibilities. In some cases, this may include being the sole emotional support system for the entire family. Over time, this does take a toll on a person, mentally, physically, and certainly emotionally. Without emotional support from husbands, wives are often left feeling alone and without a source of support within the marriage. And I can see where that would be a factor sometimes. But you just need to learn to be an adult and work through those issues and learn to communicate better on both ends, both parts. Number 3, women no longer tolerate consistent, unacceptable behavior. This might be part of it too. At a point in history, women did not work as much as today. Because of this, wives would rely more so on their husbands for financial security, even at the expense of abusive and negligent behavior. Today, this is not the case as much. As a result, women are not willing to put up with consistent, unacceptable behavior from their husbands like before. Dory Schwartz, a divorce mediator and coach, says, today's modern woman is much more unlikely to put up with infidelity. Once the honeymoon period is over, some men drastically change their behavior from romantic to controlling and emotionally abusive. Unfortunately, this happens in many marriages and women don't want to take it anymore. I mean, in a way, you can't fault a woman for that if she's being pummeled halfway to death. So in conclusion, while each relationship is unique in its own way, there are clearly more commonalities on the reasons why women tend to initiate divorce more often than men. Now, there are certainly other reasons why people choose to file for divorce, but these are some of the most common for women based on research and findings. At the end of the day, you deserve happiness in life and in your marriage. More on that later. But sometimes you just need out. More on that later. If this is you, remember, this is not Cassandra's words of this part. This is the article. So all of that to say, that whole article, I do think that many women have unrealistic expectations when coming into marriage. Our husbands are not built to fulfill every desire or need that we have. And these are Cassandra's words. We set the tone in the home. If we are miserable, we give our children a bad taste in their mouths when it comes to the marriage relationship. I do believe it is up to us to choose to be happy. And sometimes, most of the time, it is a choice that we make. We can choose to be miserable. We can choose to be happy. So how do we do this in our marriage? Well, I think number one, first off, we need to have realistic expectations when it comes to our husband. You got to remember, he is a sinner. We're all sinners at the end of the day. We all have shortcomings. We all have failures, and we're going to sin. You know, he has annoying habits, but so do you. We all have annoying habits. And honestly, different times of the month, you're going to be feeling a little more sympathetic towards those annoying habits, or you're going to be really on edge because of those annoying habits. One thing that I do is I like to remind myself, okay, this is the time of the month where I just need to watch my tongue more because I'm a little bit on edge more. And yes, that will happen. So it's always good to keep track of your cycle, know where you're at, teach your girls about their cycle, teach your girls that week 1, this happens, week 2, this happens, week 3, this happens, week 4, this happens, that they're aware and they can learn to temper that because ladies, once a month, we're going to have a few days where we struggle, maybe a week where we struggle, maybe 2 weeks where we struggle. It's not anything new. We know it's going to happen. So we need to prepare ourselves mentally for it and not take it out on our husbands during that time. It's not he didn't design the female body and all, he didn't give us all the hormones and the emotions and everything that we deal with. So, your husband will not always feel perfect. He won't always feel up to par. He's going to have down days. He's going to have hard days. If he works a secular job, sometimes there's going to be really crazy times of his job. There's going to be really stressful times of his job, and you need to keep that in mind, especially when he comes home and he's just had a really, really, really long, stressful day. That's not the day when you have the heart-to-heart adult conversation, which we'll talk about. There is a time and place to have hard adult conversations, but there's also a time when not to. And you can choose your time wisely when it comes to that. Just remember, your husband is not Mr. Darcy, which, by the way, I don't even like Mr. Darcy very much. Yes, I like Pride and Prejudice. No, I don't necessarily like dark and brooding for a personality. And if anyone knows my husband, he's like complete opposite of that. He is not dark and brooding. And that's one of the things that attracted me to him, was that he was not dark and brooding. So he's not Mr. Darcy, if that's your thing. And he's also not Gilbert Blythe, which mine would tend to be more like Gilbert Blythe than Mr. Darcy. Just honest, blunt, good guy, down to earth. He's more of that, because I've always said I was like Anne. And, but one of the most important things you can do when it comes to expectations is ditch the romance books. Obviously, any type of smut, which I think that adult romance books can be just as wicked or sinful and pornographic in nature as you watching pornography. In fact, maybe even more so, depending on the type of learner that you are. For me, I'm not auditory. I'm very visual. So if something is written down, I can remember it if I see it written down. So I know if I ever got into reading pornographic smut, that would be really bad, because that would like be in my mind forever. So I've always been very careful when it comes to literature. I don't want pornographic material in my mind. I don't want that to be entering into any type of physical relationship with my husband or be the driving force behind it. So I have to be very careful what I put in front of my eyes, and even in the form of literature. And books are very, very big deal to me. So I tend to stay with the Christian authors. And I tend to stay away from secular authors. There are some that I will read that are totally fine. Their books are not pornographic in nature, but you know what I'm talking about. You're talking the romance books that have like this big burly guy like kissing this Victorian woman, like, and it's a title like Forbidden Love or something like that. It's very obvious what types of books those are. And I think women can really fall into a trap when it comes to reading that sort of thing, because it's putting all these like fantasies in your head and these things that just aren't true. Now, if you're in a healthy relationship and you have a healthy physical relationship with your husband, that's great. But it's awful to bring on the man side or the woman's side. More and more women are getting caught up into pornography as well. It's awful for the man to bring anything extra into the relationship where he'll be thinking about that, dwelling on that when you're having the physical relationship. And it's the same way with women in books. It can be with women in books or pornography even, because then you're bringing that kind of into your physical relationship, and it's going to alter your mind. It's going to alter the mind of your husband. There's actually been studies on different types of chemicals and things that pornography releases in your brain. And it's just good to keep all of that out of the picture. So ditch the romance books. Don't compare him to other husbands as well. I feel like a lot of people, and this is a lot of preachers actually end up having affairs. And I think a lot of it goes back to women see a preacher as like being an authority on something. And, there's been studies done where a lot of women are attracted to like powerful men, right? And being a pastor isn't really a powerful thing, but some women see that as, he's perfect, he does no wrong, which is false. All preachers sin, all preachers have faults, different things like that. But, or women in the church will kind of compare their husband to the preacher or to another godly authority figure that they like. Well, that's not right for your husband. Just like you wouldn't like it if your husband compared you to another Christian lady in the church. Why can't you be more like Susie? I feel bad for Susie. Susie is the one that always gets picked on. If my husband needs an illustration in church, it's Susie. If I need an illustration for another woman, it's Susie. So poor Susie. But, you would not like it if your husband was constantly comparing you to other Christian women. So don't compare your husband to other godly men. Stop trying to change him, accept him for who he is, faults in everything, accept his flaws with his strengths. And we all have flaws and we all have strengths. We all have things we need to work on. And we all have areas where we're strong. Know what he expects from you and do it. So one of the underlying themes that I'm finding in all these women that are calling the men that are calling the John Deloney show is that they have certain things they like that their wife does, and they have certain things they don't like that she does. And sometimes she just completely ignores his wish and does what she wants. And that I have found is very triggering to most men, because most men, they want to take charge, they want to be the leader in the home, and they feel constant disrespect if you as the wife are completely going against what they want. You're doing things your own way. He tells you, I would love to have dinner by 5 every night, and you're like, I don't care. We're eating at 7:30. I don't care what you say. And so then he starves for 2.5 hours after getting home from work. I want the kids in bed by 8 so we can spend some time together. Well, I don't care. That's the only time I have with them. I'm letting them stay up till 10. If you're constantly going against his wishes, especially when he tries leading in a certain area, then it's going to get to the point where he's just going to give up. First of all, you're going to throw in the towel. And that's what I've heard from a lot of the callers. The men are just like, I'm done. Like, I don't even have an opinion anymore, because it doesn't matter what I say. She doesn't do it. And so number one, they'll stop even trying. And then number two, a lot of them are just, there's such a level of disrespect in the home. And I'm telling you, if you have a level of disrespect towards your husband, your kids are going to pick up on that. And they are also going to disrespect your husband. So however you treat your husband, that's going to be conveyed in how your kids treat him. I've seen it over and over and over again. If a wife has zero respect for her husband, is constantly talking down to him, treats him like he's another kid, the kids pick up on that, and they'll feel the same way towards dad. They'll have zero respect for him. They'll treat him like he's a kid. They won't take him seriously. So you really got to watch that. So just figure out what your husband likes and then try to do it. I know I'm married to a good man, and I know that, and we're going to talk about if you're in a tough spot in a little bit, because I know I am married to a good man and he does want to make me happy. But I feel like if he's just not a wicked man, most men want to make their wives happy, right? Think back to when you got married and you fell in love. Both of you had this strong desire, like, I'm going to make him so happy, or I'm going to make her so happy. There was that desire there. Now, as the years go by and things happen, trends happen, habits form, and maybe there is a level of disrespect from either one of you, from the husband to the wife or from the wife to the husband, that just kind of chips away at that desire to make them happy, where you feel like there's this constant tension and constant walking on eggshells and constant toxicity in the home. um, you're going to have to really go back to that foundation of, I want to make him happy and he wants to make me happy. And wives, you have a lot of power in your hands to really make an impact on your husband. It's very difficult for a husband to be upset with a wife who is going along with his wishes, doing what he wants, providing a happy home, being happy when she sees him, having a good physical relationship with him, putting his needs ahead of her own. It's going to be really hard for a man to be cross with a woman who's doing that. So, but if you are constantly nagging, picking, belittling, disrespecting, you don't care what he says, you do it your own way, that's really going to chip away at a man or a woman's desire to just make you happy. So, nobody expects from you to do it. So number 3, there is no escape clause in marriage. You got to work at it. You took those vows. It's till death do you part. Vows are very important. You stood in front of God and man, and you said, in sickness and in health, and poverty and wealth, till death do us part. So you got to make it work. And marriages are work, and yours is no exception. Um, and two, there's this mindset out, like you deserve this, like this, you go girl. If he talks to you the wrong way once, I'm part of these groups on Facebook, and it's like, I barely ever react in these groups. I like to be like, I like to listen to the John Deloney show for ideas. I like to see what's going on in marriages out there in America. I like to be a part of these groups because I like to see what's going on in homes and marriages and things across America. And I'm part of the stay-at-home moms one. And first of all, they share screenshots between them and their husband, which I find completely disgusting, that you would share private messages with an entire group of like 5,000 women. Weird. Anyways, they'll share these screenshots, and then in the comments, and it could be something like a husband saying, I want you to do this, and you completely go against what I'm asking you to do. Why do you have zero respect for me? It could be something as simple as that. And there's women in the comments being like, girl, know your worth. You divorce him so fast. That is a red flag. It's not a red flag when you're expecting respect from your partner and he's expecting respect from you. That's not a red flag. And so there's this mentality that, we shouldn't ever be with someone who will correct us, or he wants to do something differently. It's good when you're married to someone who wants you to be a better person, who isn't afraid to tell you the hard truths at times. It's called being an adult, and it's called having adult conversation, because as adults, we should not be so thin-skinned, especially with those that we love. We should be wanting to grow and improve and, have a better relationship with our husband than we did the year before, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. And if your husband knows it's going to be World War III every time he brings up a concern, then he might figure it's just not even worth it. Like, who cares what I want if it's going to be a battleground here for the next month until my wife finally decides, either one, she's going to completely ignore what I say, or two, she's going to do it. It's not worth the fight. And so they'll get to the point where they would just rather have peace than have things the way they wanted, or, whatever. So, the only disclaimer in this whole making it work is if there is abuse, if there is physical violence, if you're being slapped down, if you're being punched, if you're being shoved into walls, if this is happening in front of children, that's the only thing where you are in fear of your life, where you're in fear of your children being hurt. Go start watching true crime. Oftentimes, it starts out small and it escalates. And there are so many women that are murdered by their spouses. And it's not this sporadic thing that happens. It's a very, 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 oftentimes when a spouse is killed, they always look at Well, if a woman is killed in a marriage relationship, the husband is always the first prime suspect because oftentimes the husband is the one that does it. So this is the only exception. If you are being abused, get to a safe spot, call the authorities, protect your children. That is where they are important and their lives are important and your life is important. So if there is no abuse though, and there's just problem after problem, fighting after fighting, smashing things, throwing things, kicking holes in the wall, please get counseling, get help, and get accountability for that. This is why it's so important to be in a local church. Your pastor and his wife can help counsel you through some things. Most pastors and most wives, everything is confidential when you go to them. There are some exceptions, which is disgusting, and I think that's a shame. But most pastors and their wives, they're not going to repeat sensitive information. And if you come to them with a need and you need help, they're going to keep that confidential. So, but as women, what do you want from your husband? What do you want from him? Ask yourself this question because I'm sure he would love to know because men don't like it when you're mysterious. As much as there's like this mysterious persona that's like, celebrated. I think if you asked your husband, do you want to just know what I want or would you rather keep guessing? He's going to tell you, please tell me. At least mine's like this. Please tell me. So don't be mysterious about things. Just tell him what you expect. But here's the problem. You can't keep moving the goalpost. And I've heard a lot of calls in about this, about how the husband is like, I need you to tell me what you want. Okay, well, I want you to be, I want you to take a day off every week. I want you to take me on a date once a week. Let's go away for just me and you every 3 months. And then he starts doing it and suddenly you up the ante. And it's like, okay, that's not good enough. Now I want Starbucks every day. Now I want a mani-pedi every 2 weeks. And we have women, we have to be thankful. We have to tell our husbands a realistic goal, a realistic expectation, and then not keep moving the goalpost once he keeps doing that, because then he's going to get to the point where he's like, nothing I do is ever good enough. Nothing I do is good enough. Like I keep giving her this and she wants more and more and more and more and more. So we have to be careful about that. Have a realistic expectation and then just let him know. I've always been very open with my husband. I'll tell him, hey, I have not seen you. Like the time a month ago around the wedding, it was craziness. And I told my husband, I said, I need you to like start taking, he never takes days off. I'm like, I need a day, a week where we can reconnect. So since the wedding, he has been taking mainly about Thursdays off. That's kind of his day off. And we've been doing super long hikes together. So this past Thursday, we just did a 9.25-mile hike. And I love it because it's just us two. We don't have our phones. We are just walking. We're talking. We were hiking for like 3 or 4 hours when we did that 9-mile hike. And I love it. And we're out in the sun, we're in nature, it's nice. It's just us. But that is a way to feel very close to your husband. You've got to reconnect through all the craziness and the chaos. And I know I have older kids that can watch my younger ones. So that is an advantage, but you're going to get there eventually. I went a long time, 13 years after marriage, before I was able to even just run into town to do an errand. So you're going to get there eventually, and it will be a whole new season in your life and a whole new phase of reconnecting. Sometimes during the early years, you're just going to have to hold on for dear life. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be stressful, and it's okay to admit that. It's okay to have periods of your life where, it's a little bit harder than others, but you're going to eventually get to the golden age of when your kids grow up and you're able to go away overnight sometimes. And when Tommy turned 16 and we were able to go away for the first time, it was a little anxiety inducing because it was the first time we'd ever done it. But the sense of freedom that we had, where we didn't have to drop them off at grandma and grandpa's and we didn't have to make all these different arrangements. We were able to just leave. It was so freeing and such a good feeling. And that season is coming in your life. And there are different seasons in life. You're going to have seasons where you reconnect and you're like, it's the honeymoon phase again, right? And then you're going to have seasons that are harder, which postpartum, you have got lots of little kids. And sometimes you can just hang on to each other at the end of the day, and that's what it has to be. That's it. You're going to have seasons like that. But as your kids get older, you're going to go through really good seasons too, where you reconnect, you fall in love all over again. And it's like mountains and valleys and mountains and valleys in marriage. And that's how it is. But when you're in it for the long haul, it's a beautiful thing. And you get to see that play out, you know. So learn to have adult conversations, you know, with your husband. You're both adults. You need to learn to have conversations without yelling, without screaming, without calling names, without throwing things, without kicking things. And I would say have those adult conversations in the privacy of your bedroom, away from the kids. They don't need to. Kids know when something's going on. They can feel the tension in the air, but they don't need to know the nitty-gritty of what's going on. That's for you and your husband alone. I was just telling one of my friends this the other day. I have never, like, even with my best friends, they don't know when my husband and I are having a disagreement or arguing about something or we have a tiff. They don't know. My mom, I have never once told her about an argument that my husband and I have had. It's not hers to know. That's something private. That's something that I know for me, I'm going to get over it. I'm going to move on. We work through everything and we move on. But my mom might not be able to as much. My best friends might not be able to as much. So they don't need to know that. My mom doesn't need to know that. There's going to be times when you have to have adult conversations. You have to sit across from your husband at a table and you have to say, or in your bedroom, something is not working in our marriage right now. And we need to fix this. I need to fix this. You need to fix this. I'm in this for life. And I know you're in this for life, but this is not working right now. And hopefully, if he's an adult and if you're an adult, you can work through those things. I think we have really lost the ability as Americans in 2025 to, number one, have a disagreement with anyone. We've lost that ability. Number two, to have the hard conversations, because everything is seen as a personal attack. You know, oh, you must hate me. Oh, I can't believe, oh, well, I'm just never good enough in this area. No, you're good in other areas, but this area is lacking. We all have areas that we're lacking. So don't take things as a personal attack. Learn from them, move on, do better. That's really all I can say. And yeah, Julia, I've seen those same things in the group. She said, saw a video today, someone clipped where a woman claimed a man who argues with you is a narcissist. Everyone's a narcissist. That's another thing. Be careful about pop psychology and self-diagnosing or even diagnosing others. Be very careful about that. Narcissist is like the new trending thing. So everyone's a narcissist. You know, if someone has a problem with something you did, he's just a narcissist. There are real narcissists out there. There are. But it's like a clinical thing for a reason. You know, when they're actually diagnosed as having textbook narcissism, it's not as prevalent as you think it is. So all of us have pride in our life, which is the root of narcissism. All of us want to be right. All of us have issues in our life. That doesn't mean that all of us are narcissists. So be careful about those things. But yeah, your life shouldn't be perpetual hard conversations. You know, pick and choose what your battles are going to be. Pick and choose what hill you're going to die on. And you shouldn't be constantly bringing those up. It shouldn't be like, well, you should be able to have a hard discussion with me. Okay, but every night for like 5 years, really? Like you haven't figured out how to move on and get better and just leave it. There's a difference between having a hard conversation and then becoming a perpetual nag about something. And I think us women, we're good at not letting things go. We're good at barking things and like just hammering things in and holding grudges. And we shouldn't be, you know, because we're going to wear our husbands down if we do that. Have fun with your husband, laugh with him, enjoy him. Remember why you fell in love with him. Remember that this relationship is the most important one this side of heaven, the most important earthly relationship. I'm not talking about the relationship with you in Christ. I'm talking about the earthly relationship. Be clear on what you desire from your marriage and then only get that from him. Don't go looking for it outside of marriage. It's never a consideration. You know, cheating is not an option. Talking to someone, whether that's through texts or messages, if I would be embarrassed if my husband would see this, I'm not going to say it. You know, it's everything. You're an open book. He has your passwords. You have his passwords. You're able to get on his social media. He's able to get on your social media. It's, you know, clear cut. If you don't have anything to hide, then, that's great. If you have something to hide, there's a problem. So, how do we choose to be a happy wife? And I do believe that a lot of this comes down. We have the choice to be happy. We have the choice to be miserable. There's going to be hard seasons in your life. There's going to be times of sickness. There's going to be times of busyness. And this is when the vows most matter in the hard times. Those vows are not there for the good times. Marriage is easy in the good times. Marriage is easy in the honeymoon times. Those vows are there when you are faced with devastating news. Those vows are there when you are faced with loss, when you are faced with sorrow, when you are faced with financial difficulties, when you are faced with the loss of a job, when you are faced with the loss of a loved one. That's why those vows are there. If marriage was so easy and everyone could do it, we wouldn't need those vows in there. So just keep sight of the fact that everything is a season. Like I said, there's mountaintop days and there's valley days. And you're just going to have to sometimes hang on to each other for dear life. Your husband is not your enemy. Husbands, your wife is not your enemy. You guys are not each other's enemy. You guys are each other's allies. You keep each other first before you and the kids. What dad says goes. Dad's what mom says goes. You back each other up. You are allies against those little soldiers that you two created together. So sometimes you're just going to have to come down to choosing happiness over being miserable, choosing to smile rather than crying, choosing to laugh rather than weeping. And I have determined that whatever I do, I'm going to have fun doing it. And sometimes you just have to make that determination. I'm going to enjoy life. Yeah, this really stinks right now. Yeah, life is crazy and busy and stressful. That part of it stinks, but I have a good life. Overall, it's good. I get to wake up every morning and drink my coffee. Hallelujah. Sometimes I like going to bed at night just because I know I'm going to be able to get up in the morning and drink my coffee. I get to live and breathe and laugh with my kids and hug my husband and have all these beautiful things that God has given me. Life is good. Know that there's going to be times to regroup and work on it once these seasons are past. When you're in the midst of a super, super hard season or super busy season, or you're not seeing your husband very often, that's not the time to just like bring all your concerns to the table. You might need to keep it in the back of your mind. And then when that season is through, you're through that, bringing up that concern, you know. But just remember, though, you need to make your marriage a priority. It should be the most important relationship on earth. Plan for things, plan for days where you can reconnect with each other. Make the effort. It is well worth it. Plan the overnight getaway, plan a date. And when you have little kids, it's going to be harder. You're going to have to line up a babysitter. You're going to have to drop them off at grandma and grandpa's. But I know for me, I'm expecting my first grandson in 3 months. And I will be readily available for any time they want to go on a date. So that's going to be my mindset when it comes to my grandkids. Go on the dates, go on the times away. How you treat your husband is how your children are going to treat him. I see this phase. What you do in moderation, your kids are going to do in excess. And if you are around the house, if it's a war zone, if you are throwing things in front of your kids, freaking out, yelling, screaming, calling names, kicking holes in the wall, slamming things down, breaking things, that's going to be so ingrained in their nervous system. And if you're a husband and you're doing this, first of all, you're creating fearful life for your wife and your kids. 5-year-olds break things. 2-year-olds break things. 3-year-olds lash out in physical anger. You are an adult. You choose every time you lose your temper. You choose every time you smash something. You choose physical violence. You choose, you and you alone. It doesn't matter if someone's triggering you. It is not their fault. All the blame for that lies on you. So you don't want this element of fear ingrained in your children, because that's going to be part of their nervous system. That's going to be how they see marriage. That's going to be how they see relationships in the home. Your kids need to see the what is the word? When you're comrades, camaraderie. That's it. Your kids need to see that you're comrades. They need to see the friendship. They need to see the love exhibited. Personal issues between you and your husband should stay behind closed doors. Now, my kids will see like little arguments. I said to turn this way. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Blah, blah, blah. Things like that. They're going to obviously see little things like that. I'm talking about when you have those hard conversations where, okay, I'm in this for the long haul, but something needs to change. Like, I cannot continue with going on with our relationship like this. I cannot continue on with you treating me like this. I cannot continue on. They don't need to see those types of talks. That can stay personal. In marriage, the physical relationship is very important. That's going to provide a closeness. It's the only thing that you two are supposed to be getting from each other alone in the sanctity of marriage. Um, and it's very important because the Bible talks a few times about it, about not defrauding each other. Defrauding is an ancient word that just means you're keeping something from your husband, or the husbands are keeping something from their wives that technically is theirs. Once you get married, you're one. Your body is his body is yours. So if you need some type of physical attention, you should be able to tell him like an adult, and he should be able to reciprocate. Same thing, if he needs a physical need met, he should be able to tell you, and you should be able to reciprocate. And it is a bond that you should not have with anyone else. And so it's a very strong bond. And so sometimes there's going to be times in your life where you might even need to plan that, and you'll be happier for it because it'll bring you closer. It's definitely a very important part of marriage. And as an older woman, I am talking to you younger women and telling you it is something that only you can provide. And so you need to provide it as often as he needs it or wants it. And you're not going to regret it because it's going to bring you closer. It's going to help him with his physical needs and keep him calmer and keep him, you know, there's a closeness. There's hormones released in our brains when that's why you're supposed to save that for marriage, because there are bonds that are created through the physical intimacy. And when married people are frequently, enjoying that, then it protects you from a lot of things. It protects you from both of you from seeking that elsewhere, protects you from getting frustrated. It helps both of your moods, et cetera, et cetera. So the physical relationship is very important. The amount of children, that being said, with physical relationship, the amount of children you have is dependent on what your husband wants, not another preacher or a family member. And I've been having a lot of women reach out to me about this because their lives are so dictated by over-the-top preaching that only focuses on have as many kids as you can, have as many kids as you can, no birth control at all, not even natural family planning. Which, if natural family planning is a form of birth control, so is nursing your baby as long as it takes to prevent another pregnancy. They're both forms of birth control. They're natural forms of birth control, and I believe even women in the Bible use them. I've often bring this up. If women had no clue about their cycles, how is it that women in the Bible knew when to lay with their husbands to conceive? Lot's daughters did. There's different women that you've seen. They pick specific days where they want to lie with their husband, knowing that most likely they're going to conceive. So I do believe biblical women knew their cycles and their body and everything that went along with it. And natural family planning might be a form of natural birth control, but so is breastfeeding your child. They both are. So, it's the over-the-top preachers that focus on have as many kids, have, any type of birth control, saying you don't even breastfeed because that might prevent another pregnancy. I haven't heard anyone say that, but it's kind of along the same lines as, you don't even do natural family planning because, you might prevent it. So it's along the same vein. But they are the ones who focus so much on just having a kid, but they neglect preaching about the nurture and the admonition and raising them in the Lord. It's a full package, right? And I believe that anything that destroys an established life is a sin. I do believe in the sanctity of life. I believe that life starts at conception, that as soon as that sperm meets that egg and there's that spark of life, that is a human soul, and you should do everything in your capability to bring that baby to full term. So anything that could, interfere with that hormonal birth control is morally wrong, is what I believe. Anything that will thin your uterus lining and will cause the baby to not implant is morally wrong. That being said, you alone get to decide if you want to use any type of natural form to where you can have healthy spaces between your children, whether you need to look into medical care for yourself. You're just, your uterus is about to fall out. Having another baby so closely might kill you. You might hemorrhage to death. There's all these considerations that only you and your husband can decide. And the preacher that's preaching this stuff is not going to be the one taking care of your children. They're not going to be the one raising your children. They're not going to be the one paying for your children. They're not going to be the one bearing the responsibility. And when you decide to have another child, God puts that child in your womb, that you are dedicating the next 18 to 20 years to providing every aspect of that child's care. And it is a huge responsibility and a huge undertaking. So listen to your husband on this. I've heard stories about women who took matters into their own hands because they had heard preaching like this and they decided, by golly, I don't care what my husband says. We are having more. We're having as many as we possibly can. And, a physical relationship often results in a child. So they would take means to where they would not use protection or whatever their husband had decided, and they would get pregnant above, basically against their husband's wishes. And then this goes on to cause so much more stress on the husband because now he has another mouth to feed, and maybe he was barely making it before another pregnancy, before another child. Now he's got all this extra added pressure, and he's bitter towards the wife, which he shouldn't be. The Bible says not to be bitter, but she didn't respect him and she went against his wishes. I firmly believe that having children and how many children you have is a very, very private decision that you and your husband alone should make. That's what I believe. And I also believe to follow your husband's leading. You don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to say, yes, I'm a submissive woman. But when it comes to this area, when it comes to how I dress, when it comes to how many kids we have, when it comes to how we run the finances, I know better in this area. God has told me. No, God has said to follow your husband and submit to your husband. That's what God said. So you need to follow him in all areas. And that comes to any of the areas I just mentioned. So I know that's not popular in today's world, but I do believe in biblical roles, and I believe the man is the leader. And I believe as wives, we need to follow our husband even in this area. So I want to throw that in there too. And then lastly, just be happy. Be the reason that your husband likes coming home. You set the tone in the home, and that's where the whole, if mama ain't happy, ain't no one happy, and happy wife, happy life. Yes, there's an element of truth to that, but our happiness should not lie in our husbands alone. Where should our happiness lie? And I firmly believe our happiness should lie first and foremost in Jesus Christ. Our happiness lies in him. He is the one who fulfills us. He is the one who brings us happiness. He is the one who brings us joy. He is the one who brings us peace and calm. Our happiness should not lie in circumstances or in finances or in things. Believe me, we had a lot of kids right out of the gate from marriage, and we were living on an assistant pastor's salary, and now we're living on a full-time pastor's salary. We're not raking in the big bucks. In fact, most full-time assistant pastors of full-time pastors, they live near the poverty line. That's just, and God is blessed. We've made all our bills. We have beautiful, little home on 3 acres that I absolutely adore in the country. We have a lot for how much my husband has made throughout the years. God has blessed us above and beyond. We've had some of our greatest desires met in our life, such as we love to travel, and, we've been able to do that even on our limited budget. So, but if finances alone was where I was finding my happiness, I would be a miserable person indeed. I definitely would be. But I determined long ago that my happiness was not going to even lie in circumstances that happened, whether or not my life was going exactly how I had planned, the house I lived in, the car I drove, the way my body looked, things outside of my control. I was not going to find my happiness in those things. And I determined that I have the ability to be happy, or I have the ability to be miserable. And so I have tried my whole life from the time I was a teenager, I determined this when I was a teenager, to find my happiness in the Lord, to be content with what life threw at me, to when I married my husband, to be happy with him as a person, to accept him with all of his quirks and flaws and, little things he does. And, and I have. And we've had a really, really good marriage. And it takes a little bit of time at the beginning to navigate. And I was kind of a brat when we first got married. I was 20 years old. I had a bunch of kids in 3 years. It was a lot of stress. And I really had to work through some things. But because we had always had the mindset, we're going to work through this and it's till death do us part. We knew we had to work through it. Right. And so, yes, things almost 25 years into marriage, first of all, I would hate to ever go back to the dating stage, but we know each other so well. And there's such a camaraderie there and a friendship. I would choose it a million times over the honeymoon stage. I love this part of marriage that we're in. And nothing compares to the depth and the layers of friendship that you have after a decade and after a quarter of a century. And, nothing compares to the layers and depth of friendship that you have. So, you're not going to find happiness in any of those things. You're going to find happiness in the Lord. Your husband's not going to be able to fulfill your every desire and your every emotional problem. And he's not going to be able to cure you from all the baggage you have, maybe from the way you were raised or all the trauma things that you've been through. The Lord can heal those. The Lord can. Your husband can't. So yes, there's correct responses and all that, but he's not the one that you find all your joy and fulfillment in. If you have a hard marriage, okay, number one, pray. We often overlook the importance of prayer. God can change your husband. God can make him a better person than he is today, if your husband wants it, for sure. But God can do miracles. So pray. Get help if he is willing. If he is willing, get help from your pastor, get help from trusted friends, get help from a counselor, a Christian counselor. Get help if he's willing. Make the hard decisions if needed. If your life is in danger, you might need to make a hard decision, because especially if you have children and you're putting those children into harm's way, you might need to make a hard decision. And then let your husband know your expectations, but don't add more to them if he meets your expectations. We got to be really careful about this. We have to learn to be content. That's another whole podcast, but happiness and contentment go hand in hand. If you are a discontent woman and always wanting more and nothing's ever good enough, you're going to have a really hard time being happy. If you are unhappy, you're going to have a hard time being content. So they kind of go hand in hand. Most husbands want their wives to be happy, and they'll do anything in their power to make that happen, but we cannot be impossible to please. We can't have impossible expectations. We can't be this brawling woman and then expect our husbands to, just ignore all that and still treat us like we're a queen. We have to be pleasant. We have to be kind. We have to be nice. You should talk to your husband nicer than any other person on the planet. You should be kinder to him. You should be more pleasant to him than anyone. When wives are treating strangers nicer than their husbands, there's a huge problem. When wives have more respect for another man more than their husband, there's a huge problem. Just consider that. Our happiness doesn't lie on our husband's shoulders alone. It's too big of a burden. You're putting too big of a burden on him. You need to realize that our happiness comes from within, first of all. Number one, I believe it comes from a relationship with the Lord. It comes from finding our fulfillment in him. And that's not to say that we can't find happiness or fulfillment in our husband, because I am very happy and I can't imagine life without him. And, we have a great relationship and all that. But we should not put that whole burden of I would just be happy if my husband did this. I would just be happy if my husband did this. Probably not. Probably not, because you're putting so much on him. First of all, maybe it's impossible, and he's not capable of doing it if you have impossible expectations. But, that's not his burden to bear. He shouldn't have to have the burden of fulfilling your every woman desire and all that. So realize that sometimes you are just in a hard season, and it's okay to admit that it's hard. And it's okay to admit that, I know I'm not super happy right now because I'm really stressed out, but it's just a season, and we'll get through it. We'll get through it. And then things will be happier once I come out of this valley and I come up on the mountaintop peak, right? So know eventually that this too shall pass. And when I was younger and I used to get hurt and I would have like pain, I'd stub my toe or I don't know, hurt myself in sports. I would think in my brain, the pain will go away, the pain will go away, the pain will go away, the pain will go away. And it was like this coping mechanism that I would do whenever I would get hurt. And yeah, eventually the pain would go away. And I even did this while having my children, while having each of my 8 children with zero pain meds. So, zero pain meds with all of my children. I've had all different crazy types of births. But as I'm going through that transition period, that was really the only really like overwhelming part. I would be thinking, it's almost here. It's almost here. The end is almost here. The end is almost here. And then as soon as I would give birth to that baby, the pain did go away. So I always knew that the pain will go away. The pain will go away. Pain will go away. And it's helped in life too, even with, as I'm weeping over the loss of my dad, or when I'm weeping over the loss of one of my closest friends to cancer, I'm thinking I'm weeping and I'm sad, but I'm like, eventually it will get better. And it does to an extent. I will always have certain holes in my heart from different losses, but the pain gets a little less as you go through life. Because at the end of the day, life does move on, and we'll always have an ache there. It's never, it's not going to be that same stabbing, gut-wrenching pain as when I had the loss or a tragic thing in my life happen. Just tell yourself, this too shall pass. The pain will go away. The pain will go away. The pain will go away. And someday the pain will go away completely. When I close my eyes in death and I open them in heaven and I see my Lord and Savior, all pain will be gone. I will be reunited with loved ones. I will get to worship for the rest of eternity, the one who saved me, and the pain will go away. And as we live on earth, we're going to have different seasons. We're going to have hard seasons. We're going to have painful seasons. But when you have someone who's as committed in your marriage to you and who is overall just a good, decent guy, don't take that for granted. Work on your marriage, be in it for the long haul, and realize that we can get through everything. We're going to get through the season. We're going to work on this together. We're going to have the hard conversations. And I'm not going to be this woman that's impossible to please. I'm not going to be this miserable person that my husband comes in and you're just like, hi, honey, how's your day? Horrible. And we're going to have our days. But that shouldn't be the anthem of our life. It shouldn't be just day after day after day of turmoil and craziness and depression and sadness and anxiety. You should have a smile on your face when your husband gets home. Go knock your husband's socks off tonight when he comes home. Go give him a big smooch and give a big hug and say, I am so glad to see you. I love you so much, and see what he does. So I hope that was a blessing. I hope you go love God, love your husbands, and love your kids this week, and love them well. You are your husband's only wife. You are your kid's only mom. So you make all the difference in the home and the tone that you set, and go be the best mom and the best wife and the best Christian that you can be. And we will see you next week.